This week, Aaron Draper invites you to see the humanity in the homeless. Congress is peddling poison, the TPP takes paradise, and BP or not BP? That is the question. But first, pay attention. This could be you. Keep walking. Don't pay attention, give them no mention, spare change, care estranged. You're all the same and probably only buy drugs. You're thugs and you're down because you're low, not depressed, but below what we deem esteemed. Poor because you're lazy or dumb, so it must be, or someone like me could be you. And that can't be true. You're the others, the absentee mothers and fathers, the dropout kids who did what you did and now look at you. You fucked up and messed up, and who am I to right your wrongs? I got my own problems. I work for a living. I'm the good person, thoughtful and giving, so here's that quarter that comes with strict orders, advice to steer clear of the vice that you clearly never did heed. Get a job if you want off the streets. But why do I bother? You'll probably only buy liquor. Always sicker than the system that cheers, laughs, and jeers when you're down, kick and push you around. But no, you're at fault. Your assault on my otherwise pristine walk. Hand out, eyes down. Human suffering no longer shocks. And here's a dream you can hawk. For pennies and wishing wells, what do you have we can sell? What's the going rate for a life? When you scan the aisle for the next plastic magic, what do you trade when you go up to pay? What do you say when you wave them away? Tell yourself they need not stay, that the system will bring them the tools that they need, and out in the streets, if they still beg and plead, why then, they just waved help away. Deep down, shuffle your morals around, scrape off the bile, the brainwashing vial, do this one thing and I dare you. Walk up to a woman or man, hold out your hand and say, hi. Introduce yourself as a human who breathes the same air, as someone who also has suffered from laissez-faire, the shrug, meh, who cares? Yes, you with the clothes and the homes, computers and cars, bear the same scars of a system that uses, abuses, gives no fucks who you are. You're just one law away, one trade deal, one crash, a capitalist smash, one day away from being the one about whom they say, get a job. And I can tell you this from personal experience, the best people, the ones who do live up to humanity's name, are the ones who have little, no greed and no change, asking for some, more so the shift, less so the dimes. So whether you share what you make or simply say hi and tell them your name, don't just keep walking. Pay attention, give them a mention. I guarantee you'll see poverty's place like pawns in a game, not inherently gamed by the dumb and lazy, the insane. And the titans, tycoons, rich psycho goons are the ones who have failed, now should be jailed, stripped of their fortunes, forced to sit and repay all these ills that they once waved away. Oh, what a day. Let's get on our way. From tweets to marching in the streets, this is Act Out. Welcome to Act Out. I'm Eleanor Goldfield, and this is your tipping point. What a day indeed, when the corporate shitheads will be held to account for their crimes against humanity. In the meantime, I really do suggest that you take a minute to pay attention to those unmentionables, the ones hiding from our twisted society, because they are more than a few torn clothes and an old lined face. And I'm not the only one to notice this. Aaron Draper, a commercial photographer, has taken his passion for photography and humanity, quite literally, to the streets. He has created a brilliant and stunning series of people that are in many ways what we all strive to be. Interesting, beautiful, full of stories and raw life. Last week, I got a chance to sit down with Aaron and talk to him about his work. Take a look. Why did you choose homeless people as your subject? And then why did you choose to shoot them in this sort of almost high fashion sort of way?
I've been a commercial photographer for about 16 years. And basically that entails making people look good. You always want them, you're basically paid to make somebody look good, and they come to you and they say, hey, just make me look beautiful and pretty. And when you're doing that all day long, forever, it turns out that you start adopting things like removing lines out of their face, making their face really smooth a lot of times, and just removing anything that's considered an imperfection. And it came down to one day when I was in my studio, and I was working with one of my graphic designers, and we were heavily retouching this woman who was probably 45, closer to 50, and wanted to look 20. And I just like, gosh, she's removing everything on her face. That was what what she basically everything on her face that proved that she lived anything. Okay, she was taking every trace of any of her experiences off. And I was like, man, it's just so I stepped out of the studio and with my camera after that editing ordeal, and just went out on the street driving around, and I sort of met this guy named Leon, and he was over in sort of a more poor part of Modesto, and got to talking with him, and his face looked really interesting, and it was an exact contrast to the face I just got done editing. So his face was full of lines, full of character, really rich. Things when I looked at it, I thought, man, if I lit this guy and cross-lit him, it'd pick up every piece of texture that was on his face, and it'd look probably pretty interesting, and it looked really like beautiful because it really enhanced that texture and stuff. And so I asked him, I said, hey, Leon, I'm a photographer. Do you mind if I photograph you? And he said, hey, man, sure. I mean, the first thing he said, though, was, why would you want to photograph me? And I said, because you look amazing, I think. And I said, I think I could even make you look more amazing, honestly. The thing that I was most happy about was when I went back to him and gave him the image, his eyes got all, he started to like get really emotional. And I did too. And I thought, this is, he's probably never seen himself like this. And I thought, man, that's really cool. And I bet you other people haven't seen him like this. And so I just started to think that, this might be a really fulfilling project for me, and maybe for them, maybe for them too, that I could show them themselves in a way that they haven't seen themselves, nor could they afford to pay for if they were, if they were wanting to have that service done. So that's sort of how it started.
And did you think at the time that because one of the things that really struck me in these images, in contrast to people who just photograph a homeless person on the street, is that you not only bring this sort of almost commercial like eloquence and beauty to it, but you also bring out the humanity, like you said, because you're not fixing the lines, you're not fixing the stories that you're actually shining a light on. So you bring this tremendous sense of humanity that most of us just walk by when we see a homeless person. We don't see them as beautiful or as interesting. Was that initially part of your goal as well, or did that just sort of happen and you were surprised by it?
Again, going back to being, just working as a photographer, my goal is to make people look good, right? That's what I'm paid to do. And I don't discriminate, right? So there is no, you're homeless, so you should look bad when people photograph you. And you're an athlete or a celebrity, so you should look good and have amazing photographers photograph you. I don't see the difference between the two. And so for me, a lot of photographers, in fact, the homeless population has been photographed in black and white with long lenses, very gritty, very edgy for a long time. And that's sort of been the norm. And it's been more of a documentary feel to it. And I don't know if photographers consciously did this, but in my mind, it was a way of saying, they're not worth being lit like this because they're homeless, right? These aren't paying clients. Why would we bring out huge soft boxes and studio lights and set up a set out under an underpass when it's a homeless dude that nobody's paying us? I mean, where's the money coming from?
Art has a tremendous ability to speak to these social constructs, and your work really did that by saying, well, why can't they be photographed this way? And they're only conceived in this way because we have created this social construct that puts them in this box, in this paradigm. I'm also curious because, you said how it started off with this man named Leon, but how did the others come to be? Like, how do you approach people and say, hey, I'd like to bring out all this photographer's equipment and shoot you? How do you broach that subject?
Right. That got a little tricky initially, because a lot of them they're really wary of like outside people that they don't know. So unless you're like in their group and the people they know and are homeless yourself, they usually generally are very entrusting. And so it happens that once I shot Leon and photographed him, he would tell people, oh, that guy's cool. He's the photographer that, works with homeless dude. You should get your picture taken. Not to mention, I sweeten the deal by paying them $1 a minute, starting off as a fee for their time. And so I think when I did that, and then asked them to sign a model release and ask their permission, I think those several things together really built a sense that I was legitimate and that I wasn't there just photographing them for for who knows what. But I think that they trusted me when I asked their permission was a big thing.
What are you hoping to do with this? Would you like to create like sort of a book? Would you like to create a gallery showing? What are your hopes of how would you like to use these images?
All I wanted to do was make sure there's awareness. So however that happened, where I could sort of give this project the most exposure, the most awareness that would spread to other people that would know about it, and maybe change a couple people's minds about stuff. That's sort of what I was interested in doing. If that meant a gallery showing, that'd be great too. A book would be great. I mean, those things are all really nice. But I think social media and having it spread on there and having people see it too is extremely effective. I just like the fact that it gets exposure, honestly, and that it helps people. Like, I just want to stir the conversation and start it so that people that are really bright and smart and have really good ideas about how to help can like chime in and start joining the dialogue about how to maybe help some of these guys.
I'm curious, and this is like commercial photography, fashion photography, the stereotypically vapid. Have you gotten any pushback from colleagues or people in the industry saying, "What are you doing?"
Oh yeah, I have actually. Most of the dissent comes in the form of "I am exploiting them." They need to realize that it's a very win situation for everybody involved, and I just sort of start the process, and then the ball is a continually positive rolling ball the entire rest of the way. I find them, I pay them, I get their permission, I get a signed model release. They get an image of themselves that they really enjoy that would have cost quite a bit of money had they had to pay for it. And it's probably one of the only times in the last probably 10 or 15 years for them that have been on the streets that long that they've had an image of themselves at all. So they get all that. And then once the homeless community started introducing me to the programs that help provide for them, then I got in contact with agencies that support and advocate for the homeless. Then it became a much bigger deal where they were like, "Oh, Aaron, we didn't even realize you were doing something like this. We would love to have some of these images for our advertising and for our outreach. And obviously, no, we have no budget for this for a commercial photographer to come in either." And I was like, "That's cool because I'm not charging you, and that's what these guys the homeless community is going to help you advocate for them because they're modeling for it." So it turned out that their images are going to advocate and help the communities that are serving them. It got quite a bit of exposure on social media, and as you'd expect, there are people in there who are very negative and say that everybody's a drunk and everybody's an alcoholic, and or they come with this idea that they deserve to be there because of choices they've made, and that's completely inaccurate. And if you speak, I mean, that's true for some people, but it's also true for all of us too. I mean, sometimes there are things that happen in life, and we don't have a network, or we don't all have family that we can fall back on. And it's like most of us are one or two catastrophic events away from being on the street ourselves. And I sometimes think that that's why a lot of people, this really resonates with them either in a negative or positive way. If you can see yourself in a homeless person, then how far are you away from that?
To learn more about the project, check out the underexposed section of his site at Draper.com. And who knows, maybe Aaron can start a trend where people actually want to look human as opposed to overly airbrushed and plastic. Moving on, let's talk poison in this week's Low Life Scum Award.
You low-life scum.
So we're chasing the sun, pardon the mixture of backdrops. So poison, and not the band, is probably something that we can all agree shouldn't be in our food. Come to think of it, I actually wouldn't want the band in my food either, but that's a different story. GMOs, genetically modified organisms, have been a hot topic in recent years, if for no other reason because of the immensely dickish and secretive behavior of the companies that create and sell them. The most infamous of these is Monsanto. If you were alive in the 60s and that sounds familiar, well, it's because Monsanto is the same company that created Agent Orange, the herbicide responsible for the homicidal havoc in Vietnam still being felt today, not least of all by the children born disfigured and handicapped due to Agent Orange exposure. So yeah, that same company is creating GMO seeds and crops and selling them covertly at your local grocery store. Awesome, isn't it? Now, regardless of where you stand on this issue, two things are undebatable. One, research on the effects of these crops and seeds, both on people and planet, are lacking. And the research that we do have is either classified, performed by the companies themselves, or both. Conflict of interest much? And secondly, it's just our right as consumers to know what the hell we're consuming. 64 other countries either require labeling or have banned GMOs outright. So what's the deal with the US? Fuck if I ask myself that question every day. Well, put simply, money. GMO lobbyists don't want us to know what we're eating. In 2014 alone, $63.6 million were spent to fight GMO labeling laws. And the fact that these GMO companies have fought so vehemently against labeling seems to suggest that they have something to hide, particularly when you pair that with biased and classified research. The most recent obstruction to our right to know came with the House Resolution 1599, aka the DARK Act. What this bill proposes to do is make it illegal for states to require GMO labeling. It would negate the ability of the Food and Drug Administration to create a national GMO labeling standard and specifically allow for the labeling of products as natural, even when containing GMOs. But perhaps the most disturbing part of the bill is the fact that it would make it illegal for counties and states to place any restrictions on the planting of GMO crops. Yep, state sovereignty, go fuck yourself. Want to know what you're eating? Shut up and open wide. And the DARK Act wouldn't just stop new labeling initiatives. It would overturn over 130 local laws in 43 states, plus the hard-won victories in Vermont, Maine, and Connecticut. Last Thursday, the DARK Act came to a vote on the House floor, and it won. Yep. Big Ag held their sway and got their way. Now it'll move on to the Senate, and with that collection of paid-off pieces of shit, I expect a similar performance. However, all is not lost. While it is important to keep the pressure on our senators to keep this down, it is also important to let your members of Congress know what you think of them. You might not matter to Congress, but money does. And money likes darkness, so shine a light on that shit. Yep, I'm talking public shaming. All you twisted parents that are now, for some reason, into putting up videos of you shaming your kids on YouTube, why don't you just shift that trolling asshole behavior to some people that really deserve it? Your members of Congress. Here's the gist. Organize a public shaming event where you get a group of people together, perform some sort of street theater, or even just a theatrical speech reading out these crimes against the people, aka taking money from GMO companies. Then deliver that letter with the full group to the member of Congress's offices, and call your local media and tell them what you're up to and have them come out. Get a video? Throw it up on social media. Our friends over at Backbone Campaign also have a little starter toolkit including a spineless citation to deliver to their offices. Get the message out. When you put profit over people, you're going to get shamed. Oh, and once you've shamed these corporate dick sticks, be sure to let us know and we will gladly feature it on our show.
You low-life scum.
Now, from the poison we eat to the poison we drill and spill over people and planet, let's talk BP. BP, or British Petroleum, you may remember as the conniving little cunts behind the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in 2010. They're also the lobbyists behind continued offshore drilling and the shrugging shits avoiding spill cleanup. But BP also has quite a lot going on in their native lands. Besides being global asshats, they like to dip their oily fingers into the British art world. BP are sponsors of the Royal Opera House, the National Portrait Gallery, the Tate, the Royal Shakespeare Company, and the British Museum. To add insult to injury, BP is the overt sponsor of the new exhibition Indigenous Australia, now open at the British Museum. Jess Worth, a member of the Royal Shakespeare Company and environmental activist, took issue with this and decided to use the group that she helped start, BP or Not BP, to send a loud, graphic, and theatrical message to both BP and the British Museum. Take a look.
The BP or Not BP is a theatrical protest group And we sprang to life in 2012 because BP was sponsoring the World Shakespeare Festival. So for the whole of the World Shakespeare Festival then, we invaded the stage about once a month, once for each of the different plays that was being sponsored, with different performers every time, with a different script, and we would look at the play that was being sponsored and find words and themes and well-known phrases and ideas in there that we would then give a kind of BP tinge to. So audiences really responded to that because they were seeing things that they recognised and they enjoyed the humour.
So talk a little bit about the British Museum. What exactly is their relationship with BP? And I know that the action that you did also focused on Indigenous peoples. How does that fold into the British Museum's relationship with BP?
So the British Museum has a long-running relationship with BP. I think it's maybe about 20 years. So this has been going on for a long time. And they're currently in a 5-year cycle of sponsorship, and BP is sponsoring some of their major high-profile exhibitions. So that's what BP gets out of it. They get the really kind of flashy stuff that gets the maximum publicity they can put their logo onto. And we've been targeting the British Museum probably for about 18 months because that 5-year sponsorship deal is coming up for renewal. So that's going to be decided next spring. So we think the conversations internally about whether or not to continue the relationship with BP are probably starting to happen now. So that's why we've been ramping up. And the current exhibition that's being sponsored by BP is Indigenous Australia Enduring Civilization, which is a particularly kind of offensive exhibition to put a BP logo onto. And I think a lot of people have felt that, considering that climate change is one of the major reasons why those civilizations may not endure much longer. But also BP is in conflict and has historically been in conflict with Indigenous communities all over the world, throwing them off their land, polluting their water, even kind of funding paramilitaries in Colombia and stuff. So it's really, really insensitive of the British Museum to have put the BP logo on that particular exhibition. And the exhibition itself is super sensitive because the British Museum is like the museum of colonial history. Like, so much of the stuff in that museum is not ours, doesn't belong to the British people, it was stolen. And some of the objects in the exhibition specifically are contested objects that the communities have even taken legal action to get back, and the British Museum has won and has kept them. So there's a real sense of rubbing it in a lot of people's faces. So then you put the BP logo on top of that and you've got a very explosive situation. Well, we actually occupied the space for over 3 hours, which is by far the longest performance we've ever done. And within that performance, we had different characters that kind of brought up the different elements, the different problems of the exhibition. And then we had a central British Museum character who was essentially being controlled or distracted by a very sinister BP character. So they were like the central dynamic. And then we built a drilling rig and then had a spill, and we had like a chorus that were making the noises of the explosion and the spill. So that spilled everywhere, and we had spill cleanup workers, and then they came and talked to the British Museum and said, look at the extent of the destruction, we can't clean it up, how can you be supporting this company? And then we had a colonial explorer who'd just returned from Australia saying, look at all this stuff that I've managed to get for you, don't you worry about where it came from. And then an audience member sort of representing us, challenging that and challenging our whole colonial history and saying, this is not okay, we're not okay with this, we need to give these objects back. And then we had a really angry climate scientist who was like, you're not listening to the science, British Museum. But BP was busy kind of putting lots of money in front of their face, so they were distracted. And we had a lot of people in animal masks making animal noises, kind of representing the wildlife that's being destroyed. And then we had quotes from Aboriginal people about the stolen objects, but also about how they feel about BP and the challenges that climate change is kind of having on their ability to survive. and maintain their traditions. So that was the kind of formal performance, and then we invited museum goers to kind of join us for storytelling. The banner that we'd made for the Indigenous Australia exhibition that said stolen land, stolen culture, stolen climate. So it's kind of trying to cover all of those different aspects. We wrote messages of solidarity all over it, and we've sent it to the Aboriginal communities in Australia who are going to be protesting at the exhibition when it transfers over there. So that was a really powerful kind of solidarity piece. And then we also we printed out like 500 formal, like official British Museum feedback forms, and we got museum goers to fill it in, whatever they wanted to say, but they were kind of saying drop BP and give the stolen objects back. So yeah, all in all, that we kind of took over that space for 3 hours and we did all of those things, and it felt really, really powerful because we found a lot of people were engaging with us. A lot of people got the issues, were really supportive.
For more information on upcoming actions and to see past presentations, check out bpornotbp.org, with dashes, it's right there. Finally this week, let's head to the front lines in Paradise. Right now, as you watch this, TPP trade ministers are meeting in Maui to discuss a forthcoming conclusion to TPP negotiations. What that really means is a bunch of corporate lawyers and politicians for sale are meeting in Paradise to discuss the destruction of the planet. Nice, right? As you know, if you've been watching my show, the TPP makes the destruction caused by NATO look like a broken nail. TPP is like a full arm amputation in comparison, literally threatening every facet of your life, from the food you eat to the air you breathe, to your posts on Facebook, to whoever's driving that train. If you happen to not be in Hawaii, don't worry. There are solidarity actions planned across the country, and if you don't see one on the map, add your own. Go to flushthetpp.org, click on Actions, and check out their map. While all the issues that we cover on this show are important, the TPP has a tentacle in every one of them. This is the big fight against corporate rule. This is the behemoth monster that we have to slay. And just in case you think there's no fun and games associated with giving a large middle finger to the establishment, here are some images from a TPP event last week in DC. Organized by Popular Resistance, a group that has worked tirelessly on this issue, and someone you should definitely check out for TPP updates and information. Watch out for the Vuvuzela, sunshine, and good-looking activists dropping some truth outside of a corporately sponsored circle jerk for Congressman Wyden, Ryan, and Hatch. Also, check out our Facebook page for more images and links to TPP affiliate pages. And that about does it for this week. Thank you so much for watching. Next week, we'll be on the road in Los Angeles bringing you some badass interviews plus footage from our creative activism event and some behind-the-scenes extras of activists in the studio. But for now, please spread and share this with all your friends, foes, and people you don't know. As always, check out the last slide to see all the sites that I mentioned in the show. There will also be a link to help support Occupy.com and all of the delicious dissent delivered daily thanks to donations like yours. It's a 501c3, so anything you can contribute is tax deductible and hugely appreciated. Be sure to follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and subscribe on YouTube. From this very sunny Devil's Den, good night and act out.